Gymnastics gave me a level of self-confidence. At the age of 10, I was learning to do like a back somersault on a wooden beam that's 10 centimetres wide and a metre off the floor.
Goodness
There's
me.
1,000 other Claires out there.
I do not want to be on the other side of that battle.
I'm able to do all the things I'm doing now because I just keep getting back up. Like, I haven't had an easy ride, but I do always get back up. Well, for me, it's throwing myself off stuff and being caught.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Getting Back Up with me, Anthony Ogogo. In this podcast, I talk to people that have done great things in both their life and or career, but only after suffering massive setback and adversity. This right here, this podcast, is your weekly dose of hope and inspiration. And today I have the wonderful, the charismatic Claire Heafford on the podcast. Claire's a friend of mine. She's a former gymnast, a former elite 400-meter sprinter. She calls herself a professional agitator. She's an entrepreneur. She's done so many things in her life and continues to do so many things. And in my humble opinion, the world changes because of people like Claire. And you're going to hear this in this podcast. Claire fights for good. And mainly today we talk about the White Review. Now, for those that aren't familiar with the White Review is a review done by Sport England and GB Gymnastics into the ingrained abuse, the systematic abuse that thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of gymnasts have suffered in the world of gymnastics, mainly young women, young girls. And we talk about that today. And heads up, this is a powerful conversation. We really go there. Claire talks about the abuse that she suffered at the hands of her gymnastic coaches back in the day, and how that's affected her now. Still, as a 40-year-old woman, she still feels the effects of the abuses she suffered. And we talk about my career. It's a really fascinating and powerful conversation, and I think you're going to really enjoy this one. You're going to learn a lot from this one. And so, without further ado, let's get stuck in. I am so thrilled to be joined by the charismatic Claire Heafford.
Thank you.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Anthony. I'm very happy to be here.
Good, I'm glad. Let's see if you're happy in about 45 minutes. As you know, this is the Getting Back Up podcast, where I'll talk to inspiring people, which you are. You've inspired me a lot, and you really have, and we're going to talk about some of those, some of that stuff later. But I'll talk to people that have done great things about their life and or career, but only after suffering massive setback and adversity. Or amidst suffering massive setback and adversity. In a nutshell, that's pretty much you, isn't it? You've gone through a lot in your young life, and we're going to talk more about it. And I'm going to ask you lots of questions today. I'm going to dig, I'm going to poke, I'm going to pry. I might even recently had somebody on, and I actually pissed them off by asking questions and telling my just being honest, really. So if I do, I want to apologize. However, I'm still going to ask him. Before I do, I'm going to ask you a question, and it's the most important question of the day, and I really hope you take your time to answer it very honestly. How the bloody hell are you, Claire?
That is a good question.
And I mean it, and I really mean, how are you?
Well, there's the positive version, right? Yeah, I'm doing great. There's so much amazing positive things happening in my life right now. And then there's the kind of more honest version, which is that last year was a shit show, and I'm very much in the process of still getting back up from that. My partner suffered a devastating injury in the ring, and that triggered a mental health crisis for him, and we lived with that all year. And the loss of income put us in financial difficulties for the kind of third year in a row after the pandemic had already done that. So we went through a lot last year, and I think we're turning the corner. There's a lot of really amazing stuff happening in my life, but I'm not in the best place. I'm still in the process of getting back up, I'd say.
So 2023 was a tough year.
2023 was the toughest year of my life, I think.
Was it really?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Really? I know you've been through some stuff.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about it today. What was the worst part of last year?
It was yet another setback and difficulty on top of a number of years of struggle. I used to run a business. I had a wonderful business partner for 8 years, and I was married to a husband who I loved very dearly, and I ended up having a partnership dispute for that business, and I lost my best friend, a business partner. and it felt like a divorce. And then a couple of years later, I got divorced from my husband. So then I was in this process of setting up a new life for myself. And part of that was being of an age where I wanted to have a baby. So I really prioritized having a baby, but being the crazy person that I am, I had a baby and set up a business and did up a flat at the same time, and was in the midst of all of that when the pandemic hit and Tom lost all his performing income. And so financially we were in a difficult place for 2 years. And then we came out of the pandemic with positivity and trying to strive to make the life that we wanted. We set up a professional wrestling school. It was going great. His career was where it should be again, and it was about to take off, and then injury struck. So I think it's that thing that anyone can cope with adversity, but when the adversity gets layered, when it's layer upon layer upon layer, you start to create negativity for yourself in your own mind of being like, well, what is it about me? Like, why did this happen again? And, there's the events that happen, but there's the negative self-talk that goes with it. So I think what was so bad about last year was just how many issues we were facing simultaneously. The constant.
There's no, when you think you're out of it, you get dragged back down again. Then you get out of it and you fight and you claw to get out, and you get dragged back down again. And it's like, I've been there when you're talking. I was like, yep, I get it. I get that. Yep. Oh yeah, I get that. For those that don't know who you are, a little brief, because I've got a list. So anything you miss, I'm gonna pull you up on it. So who are you, and why are we talking today?
I know you because you've been to my gymnastics classes, and I had the pleasure of teaching you backflips and back somersaults. So I'm a gymnastics coach, and I try to do that in a very different way from the way I was coached as a gymnast. I am an entrepreneur. I've been setting up and running businesses for 15 years now, I think. So that for me is kind of who I am, and it's a way of life. I'm a good organizer, and I like to get things set up and going. I'm not so good at maintaining them. I get bored, so I like to move on to the next project. I'm, as we were discussing before, a kind of professional agitator at this point. I see my role as to maybe be the person to say things that perhaps others are afraid to say. Certainly in the world of sport, it's perhaps a new turn for me that I am choosing to deploy the skills that I've built up over the last 20 years of work now within the sports world. Because I guess coming out as an athlete, I felt like as a female athlete, that world wasn't for me. Like a female coaches are not necessarily, I was coming out of athletics at that point, so I didn't really see that there was a role for me or my ideas within that. I'm trying to influence the world of sport, but in a different way than like being a performance coach or something like that.
Trying to, and I'm sure you will, because like you are small in stature, but oh goodness, are you mighty? You're one mighty, powerful woman, and I love that, and I'm all about that. You missed out a few things. You are an artist, and we're going to talk about that. An activist, a campaigner, a professional agitator, as you said, and you also said troublemaker. And some of your friends from way, way, way back, their parents still call you the troublemaker, right?
That's right. Yeah, it was something that came up recently. One of my training partners from when I was 10 years old, who we trained in very adverse conditions in a club in the heart of the home counties, and we were trained by the first Russian coach that came over to the UK when the Soviet Union was falling apart. In that world,
giving your age away, Claire. You're giving your age away.
Yeah, totally. Gymnast of the 90s. Yeah, in that world there is only compliance. I guess I always had a slightly defiant streak and would never be the one that cried. The parents labelled me the troublemaker. And that used to kind of upset me. And this training partner, who's recently gotten involved in a project I'm running, she said, no, yeah, my parents watch the news. They see you talk on the news and they still say, stay away from that girl. She's a troublemaker. So I thought, yeah, I need to make that part of my identity and something that I'm proud of.
Troublemakers change the world. They change the world, because if they don't take a stance, the world stays, and change the world for the better. Because otherwise, troublemakers, quote unquote, if they're not there, things stay as they are. We're only changing and things progress and get better because some people have the strength and bravery to say, no, I'm not having this anymore. And that's exactly what you've done massively. You're also a lecturer. You create companies, as you mentioned, ex-gymnast, a former 400-meter hurdler, NLP practitioner, MA cultural theorist, politics fan, serial entrepreneur, professional wrestler, unbelievable gymnastics coach. You, as I mentioned, like I'm not the most, shall we say, agile or flexible, but you got me to do. What are you laughing at? You meant to say no, you're really good. You got me to do a backflip and a front flip, and you've really improved my performance. It's interesting you said 2023 was a difficult year, and I understand why, because you've explained. However, there was some light in 2023, and that's the White Review. So for those who don't know about the White Review and what you are really well known for, and you've been on, you've spoken about it on radio, BBC, national coverage. What is the White Review, and what is your part of it?
So the White Review was a review that was published in June 2022, and it was an investigation, a report into the culture of abuse at the heart of British gymnastics and within the UK British gymnastics scene. And it found that abuse was endemic within the sport, and that it was happening at all levels of the sport and across many clubs. Around 100 coaches and 90 clubs were reported to Anne White. And so last year was the first year in which British Gymnastics began to respond to that review and begin a process of reform, some of which has been good. Most of it has been an inadequate response, in my opinion. And so I speak in the news a lot about the ins and outs of that process of reforming a sport, reforming a culture that's predicated on silencing athletes, creating fear, very toxic training practices which are totally outdated and are based on a lot of very negative gender stereotypes.
Can you talk about some of those experiences, your experiences, and some things which happen? Because when I think of abuse, I go straight to sexual. I go, oh, are they doing stuff like that? Because that's happened a lot, time and time again. And you often see, especially in gymnastics, you often see, like, even when I was a kid, and I actually, I don't know if you know this, but I used to do gymnastics when I was little. I did one competition, I got a silver medal.
Amazing.
And I walked away. I literally went there as a cheaper option for childcare because my sister did gymnastics. And I remember when I was a kid watching gymnastics on TV, all the coaches are really touchy-feely with the girls. I remember being a kid thinking, that's a bit weird. Was it always like that?
I think if we look at the history of the sport, what we see is that there are very, very negative gender stereotypes that were at the heart of the sport when it began.
When did it begin? So
the kind of first modern gymnastics, it was included in the first modern Olympics, so whatever that was, 1890 something. And at that stage, it was really that it was just for men at that point, and it was men showing strength and agility. And then as the sport developed, by the 1950s, women were much more involved, and it was called women's artistic gymnastics. And it was about the artistry. It was about women's bodies with all their curves, doing dance and agility skills on various pieces of equipment. But as the sport developed through to the beginning of the 70s, there was this shift that happened. And it happened because, particularly in Russia, where calisthenics and gymnastics were very important to their sense of national identity. There was also, at that time, a very rich circus scene in Russia. They had very particular skills. They had circus skills where they trained circus performers in really difficult tricks, basically. And those tricks started to make their way into the women's side of the sport, particularly by there being male coaches coming in who knew how to teach those skills, either from circus or from the men's side of the sport. So at that point, the men's side of the sport was more acrobatic, and those male coaches came in to teach the young girls how to do these tricks. And part of that process was that those male coaches were used to working with the bodies of young boys, and so they preferred prepubescent girls. And so as these prepubescent girls learned these much more difficult tricks, we got Olga Korbut and Nadia Comaneci. And when they started performing the Olympics, that became the absolute icon of the Olympics. And so that began this process of the sport becoming more and more focused on the control of the bodies of women keeping them in a prepubescent state, because essentially a lighter, smaller gymnast was easier for the male coach to catch when they were learning more dangerous tricks. Because the reality is that these tricks are so dangerous that sometimes people lose their lives. And there was a very important moment in the sport with a gymnast in Russia called Elena Mukina, and she was being encouraged to do this particular move that only male gymnasts did on the floor. She was saying for a number of weeks before an incident that she didn't feel safe doing it. She didn't want to do it. The coaches kept shutting her down and saying, if you don't do it, you won't go to the World Championships. So she kept doing it, and then one day she broke her neck and she became a quadriplegic. And she lived for another 10 years, but it meant that she had an early death. And she had an early death really because she had been silenced. And that incident speaks very clearly of the silencing of female voices in the sport, in which you must be compliant at all times, partly for safety, but partly because you staying silent allows the coach to intimidate you. And there's a saying in gymnastics, which is, many coaches go by this mantra, which is that you have to make the athlete more afraid of the coach than of the skill. And if you make the child more afraid of the coach, they'll do the skill even though everything in their body is telling them not to do it because it's so dangerous. And so that is the bedrock of what women's artistic gymnastics is and how it's coached.
I listened to something you said recently, as a piece on the BBC. You said you did it last year, and you said that like gymnasts, like kids, like little girls, will refuse toilet breaks, refuse water, food taken away from them, checked on the scales all the time. And then I'll be honest, at first I was like, again, before I learned the age, I was like, but that's what happened to me. That's quite normal, right? It's quite, when you're an elite athlete, you gotta do things that you don't want to do. You gotta be forced to do things because elite sport is so hard. And gymnastics, I respect gymnastics. I said I was a former gymnast. I did one competition, but my sister did gymnastics, and I get it. And I know sport, whether it's curling or gymnastics or boxing. I know the level of degree you got to do to get to the top. And I thought, but isn't this stuff like devil's advocate in elite sport? Have you not got to do this to get to the top?
I mean, that's a good question to ask, and that's a question that a lot of the general public ask. One initial response is to say, the key difference between what happens in gymnastics and your experiences as a boxer were that you had agency in that many of those things happened to you post the age of 18, and you were competing at the age of 20, 21, 22, 23. You were making choices for yourself. And what we're talking about here is child abuse, because it's happening to children from the age of 6. And one of the aspects of gymnastics is that around this time of the acrobatization of the sport, in which the bodies of prepubescent girls were being favored, the girls had to begin training at the age of 6, and then the goal of the coach was it's going to take 10 years to get them to an international standard. So you've got this 10-year window where you have to apply maximum pressure and stop them from going through puberty.
How do you do that?
You can keep a child through going through puberty by making them train 30 hours a week, by underfeeding them. It's quite a simple process. And so I think you have to ask the question, is it right to force children to train adult athlete hours? It's normal for a professional athlete who's being paid or funded to train up to 30 hours a week or 40 hours a week. But it's not normal in really any other sport. You might get significant training hours in a sport like swimming at a young age, perhaps dance and ballet, but gymnastics is very unusual in the amount of hours that are expected of an elite child athlete.
And again, devil's advocate. Mm-hmm. I was boxing from 12 years old. I remember my first fight, I was 12 years old. I lost half a stone, 3 kilos from Monday to Friday, because I had to box on a Friday. My nephew and my niece box now. My nephew Sonny, he's got nothing on him, 30-odd kilos. He has to lose weight to box now, and he's gone on runs in black bin bags, and he's not having dinner here and there. Because that's what you've got to do as an athlete, and he's 11. My coach would always say to me, "Oh, you fat boy, all come with fat boy, because if I'm overweight, if I do the national championships at 60 kilos and my first fight is in September and the finals in May, I'm a 13-14-year-old boy growing. But if I do 60 kilos in September, I've got to be 60 kilos in the final come May. And obviously I'm getting bigger and growing. And my coaches always call me fat boy, or saying, oh, you've got love handles, or making me train in bin bags and the skip. And I didn't think it was emotional abuse. I just said, oh, fuck, I've got to lose some weight, get a skipping rope and skip. So what's the difference is the difference I'm a boy and that's a girl?
No, the difference is not that you're a boy and it's a girl. The one way to answer that is to say, now that you're a former athlete, what effect do you think that those training techniques have had on you in the last 10 years as you've been a kind of recovering athlete? I mean, one way I refer to myself is as a recovering athlete, because I went through what I did in gymnastics and then I went into athletics. The difference for me between how I was treated in gymnastics and athletics was that in gymnastics, it was done to me. By the time I went in athletics, I'd internalized all the self-hate and negativity and the motivating things that people say to help you achieve these difficult things, and I was saying them to myself. And the logical conclusion of an athlete saying, whether it's said to them or they say it to themselves, is that you push yourself so hard that you take yourself to the edge. And I would say to you, tell me about your experiences of being on the edge and your mental health breaking down because you were seeking to perform at the absolute antithesis of what's considered to be Olympian status, superhuman. And within that, would you consider that your human rights were being upheld? Or did you trade in your human rights for a badge that says Olympian? And was that trade worth it to you now as an adult who has been through marriage and divorce and family member deaths and everything, the adversity that life throws at you?
It's a really fascinating question. And that's why I've been looking forward to this for so long, because you're really smart, you're really intelligent. I think the world of you. You've inspired me. We've had deep conversations in the past about life and business and stuff. And I've been looking forward to this one because it's what I wanted to do, though. It's what I wanted to do. And I didn't, as I mentioned, our fat boy got on the scales. Oh, you got love handles. What are you doing? And being forced to lose weight as a 12-year-old, 13, 14, 15, 16. I mean, I'm 6'2" now. I'd probably be 6'8" if I didn't have to lose weight all that time. And my growth, I guess, was stunted. And I was getting hit. I remember I was 12 years old. I sparred Danny Morse. Danny Morse was a 29-year-old copper, a policeman. He went to the gym. He beat the shit out of me in that sparring session. And I'm trying to, and I'm going to come on to other stuff as well. I'm not being a dick for the sake of being a dick. I'm genuinely, I want to poke and pry. I want to learn. And there's something, so I'm going to sound like a hypocrite because I want to end this chapter with something I heard you say before, and it made my heart go. Because honestly, I was listening to these people say, oh yeah, kids know they can't go for a wee. And I was like, well, I wasn't allowed to go for a wee mid-session. I couldn't go for a wee. I had to train. If I had my gloves on, I need a wee, coach. Tough, hold it in, because I'm sparring. I don't want to spar anymore. I'm tired. I never said that because I knew if I did say that, they're saying extra rounds now for saying don't want to spar. But I didn't think that was abuse. That was what you got to do to be successful. If I want to win the national championships, I know I've got to train hard. I know I've got to spar hard. I know I've got to spar men. And I had concussions as a kid sparring men. Just so I used to come home from blood on my vest. And Mum said to me, is that your blood? And it was 100% my blood because Danny Morse battered the fuck out of me. He was a grown man and I was a boy. I was like, oh, no, that's the mum. It's the boy I was sparring. I'd make up names. It's Johnny's blood. There was no Johnny, But I never saw it as abuse. And I still don't really see it as abuse because ultimately I walked in that gym and I wanted to become a champion. And I was told by my coaches, this is what champions have got to do. And I read the autobiographies and I saw their training regimen in the 50s and 60s and it was brutal. And it was the way it was always been done. So, and I know these are lived experiences that you've lived through and still live through. But aren't these coaches just doing what they got to do to get for their gymnasts to win medals?
So I'd go back to just a point that you made, which was you went into the gym and you followed your dream. That was what you wanted to do. And you walked out a bronze medalist at the Olympics. Job done. you followed the process and you came out on top until you got injured, and that was a very different story in your professional career. For many people going through that Olympic process of trying to make the Olympic team, they get broken in the process. So what happens in this Olympic dream scenario is the reality is that the Olympics, the International Olympic Committee, is an enormous corporation that these days, since the 50s, makes billions of pounds, billions of dollars every year. And that money is generated off the backs of people like you who've sacrificed everything in their life, believing in the Olympic dream, who achieve it. And those people that achieve the dream then go on to believe the system works because it worked for them. But my question to you would be, how many teammates, training partners, friends were left broken by that system?
And my response to that was, okay, so these people were left broken. If they got a medal, is it okay? Is it that does make it okay? Is it them lacking a medal that the reason why this is an issue now? If they won a medal, would there not be any problems?
Exactly. So there was a really interesting example at the last Olympics where I think it was like maybe the men's rowing 8 got out of the boat, and half the team went to the media and said, we only won the bronze medal. And we only won the bronze medal because our coach, who had been taken away for being abusive, wasn't allowed to coach us. And if he'd have been there coaching us, we'd have won the gold. And we failed because the abusive coach was taken away from the system. And the other half came out the boat and said, we want to talk about how many of our teammates have been left broken at home who didn't make it into the boat because of what that coach did in the previous years in the run up to the Olympics. And so what you get is a very split opinion about what constitutes abuse in sport and what is worth the abuse, at what cost. The way that I think of it is that essentially, in order to gain the Olympian status, you're making a Faustian pact. And in that Faustian pact, you say, I want to have superhuman status for the rest of my life. And in order to gain that, you have to give away your human rights. So for me, my work now is focused on using human rights frameworks to look at what goes on in the world of sport and how does sport justify its training practices as sitting outside and above and beyond the law. So you're referring to a training experience where, what did you say, as a 12-year-old you were beaten up by a 29-year-old? Well, that's like physical abuse. That's GBH, ABH, I don't know. What's the definition?
And he was a policeman.
Right? That's taken a really good beating. That's not okay. So what is it about sport that means that you've been prepared to not see it as that?
I chose to walk in the gym and John said, do you want to spar? Or maybe he said just sparring, and I sparred. But I had the power to say, I don't want to spar him. He's got a hairy chest. He's got this. But I didn't. Now, I might have thought he had a hairy chest. I might have thought he was a grown man. I knew he was a copper. And I knew I probably, he wasn't, I knew I wasn't going to, probably win the spar, quote unquote, because you don't win sparring. You just, it's training. But I chose to do it. And don't young girls and women, they choose to go gymnastics. Can they say, I don't want to go, I don't like this man, this coach has been... They're choosing to be there, right?
So, I mean, I think you're asking interesting questions, right? But it's 2024, and there's been a huge wave of, when we talk about sex, we talk now about consent. The Me Too movement has brought into public discourse very, very nuanced ideas around what constitutes consent. And it seems to me that those ideas around consent also need to apply to what people do and don't consent to in sport. Was a 12-year-old boy really in a position to be able to consent to being beaten up by a 29-year-old? I would argue probably not. And you're saying you chose to do it, but like, what is the framework in which you were doing it? You didn't choose. It was like, this was the only way you could prove that you had what it took to continue to receive the attention and praise and time from your coach that meant that you got to where you wanted to be. But that doesn't mean that in the process you didn't have to subjugate the parts of you that were afraid or not acknowledge the parts of you that were afraid.
Oh, I like that on that one. And just so you know, my coach said to me, that was the day that he knew I was going to be good, because I took half a pasting for my man, and I came back the next day and wanted to spar him again, and then I obviously got better. And then when I got too good, he went. He never came. I never got my own back. However, yes, you said about like what part of me was broken, what part of me did I lose in that one particular spar. And there were many of those spars. There's many of those spars with different people that were better, because you got to spar people better than you to get better. But, and I get what did I lose, what was broken, but what did I gain? Or what did I, like, think of me as a person, what did I gain? Like, not just boxing skills, and I learned to block this jab. I learned when he throws his feint, don't fall for the trap. But what did I learn about myself? I learned that I was tough. I learned that a 12-year-old boy could stand with a man toe-to-toe and still be there. And what confidence did that give me, not just in the boxing ring, but in life? These are the intangibles you can't really, these are why this conversation is so interesting, because it's like, for me, it's like, I'm trying to relate what I to what you did. And I'm trying to think, okay, but this is what I got from it. And I can imagine that the gymnastics floor, the bars, the rings, that's an unforgiving place to be, in front of thousands of people in the arena, TV screens, unforgiving, right? And so is the boxing ring. It's the loneliest place in the world. Isn't training, the whole point of training is to get you ready for that. It's get you ready for that unforgiving place. For the floor, for the rings, the bars, for the boxing ring.
The issue is that what if that process breaks people along the way? Because it does. And how many of those people are broken along the way? Then you're just talking a numbers game, where you basically beat up in whatever way your sport beats up on you for a process of 10, 15 years, because that's how long it takes to make an Olympic champion. How many people are left broken by that system? And surely there's a different way of doing it, which I think there is. And so I spent a lot of time in my early 30s reading, like biographies, autobiographies from sports people. And I started to notice that the people that are successful out there, who have kind of long careers, they tend to do it in a number of ways. Often they fall back on God, and they'll use God as a justification. So they'll say, my talent is God-given, and I'm doing this in honor of God. So they make it about something greater than themselves. And the other version of doing that, which is non-religious, is you get these people occasionally in sport who the way that they move and the way that they are able to perform is quite unique, and it breaks the mold of their sport. And they just are out there being the most unique versions of themselves that they can be. And those tend to be the people that we remember. So Usain Bolt, until Usain Bolt came along, we all thought that the best 100-meter runner in the world would be around about a little bit under 6 foot. But he broke the mold. He did it in a completely different way. And as a result, he is the person that we think of as the archetypal best person ever. But really what it is that for some reason in his upbringing and his coaching, he was able to be left alone to be him, and it didn't break him, and he just gets to shine. That's why everybody loves him. And really that's what we want from our sports people. We don't want to sit and watch sports TV shows with panel discussions with people that are like cookie cutters, that haven't got any opinions and don't know what to say for themselves because they've been broken by the sport and they don't have a personality. Like, if sport is supposed to be entertaining, then let's watch people who are being the best versions of themselves that they can be. And to be that, you need a very different coaching system, which is hopefully what I try to do, in a very small way in what I do as a coach. I'm not really interested in working with performance athletes, but it's wonderful when Olympia comes along to one of my sessions and I get to coach you in the way that I enjoy doing. And hopefully from that, you've seen that maybe there's an alternative. Yeah. Maybe there's a different way of supporting a young person to find themselves, to get self-belief, to develop confidence, to develop resilience, to be creative, to rely on creativity, to do things differently, to do things in a way that works for them, that allows space for the objections that their unconscious might come up with. Because you get a lot in sport. The coach would be like, oh, well, this child or this athlete's really difficult, and they're getting in their own way, and they'll just bully on you and be like, you don't fit the mold. But another way of doing it is saying, hey, what's coming up for that kid? Something in their background has created this resistance in them, that they don't believe in themselves the way that we're seeing that they are capable of achieving. And, what happens actually is, if you have a conversation with that athlete about, maybe why don't they feel so confident when they get on the start line, and why are they not delivering when they're performing in the way that they deliver when they're in the training space. So there are other ways, in my opinion, and those ways do not involve physical, emotional, or sexual abuse of athletes.
Yeah. No, let's Claire, you talk so passionately about this, and I've enjoyed this topic. And I mentioned earlier that, like, I was doing my research on this matter, on the White Review, and I hope you and listeners appreciate the fact that my experiences, I'm telling my lived experience.
Of course. And
everything that you say is so bad, and I'm not saying it's not bad. 7-year-old girls, you say no, you can't go for a week. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. I'm just saying that I lived something very similar, and for me, I'm taking away and I'm focused on the benefits I got from it, rather than things I didn't get. And we've had private conversations about that. However, if I sound like I've been like on the other side of the fence, I'm not on the other side of the fence. Maybe I was teetering a little bit when I first was reading it. One sentence changed it. I was on your Instagram, and I'm going to share your Instagram, because if you want to learn more about Claire and the amazing work she does, and Play Fight that she runs with Tom and all the things, please check out Claire, and we'll do all the stuff at the end. But I saw this on your Instagram today, and I went, oh, yeah, of course. And it made sense to me. Obviously, you suffered abuse, and you've been championing, you champion, other people that suffer like yourself. You said on your gram, I think it was BBC. I think you said you took on the belief that you were You took on the belief that you were a hateable person. You spent your entire adult life thinking you were hateable, and today I don't need to feel that anymore. I'm getting goosebumps just saying it, and I messed up. I'm going to say it again. Lawrence in the edit, make me sound smooth. You said, because obviously, I think there was a day in September 2023. GB Gymnastics agreed that, like, there were lots of bad coaches out there doing horrible things, and you got that vindication that you so desperately wanted. And you said this, and it made me change my whole perspective. You said, you took on the belief that you were a hateable person. You spent your entire adult life thinking you were hateable, and today I don't need to feel that anymore. And you said that with tears in your eyes, and then that puts it all into perspective. You'd carried around this hate that somebody else had bestowed upon you until your adult years. And I'm just so unbelievably pleased that you finally got the vindication that you needed. And I just hope all the other people that went through what you went through, like, get that as well. That's not okay. And that sentence changed my whole perspective on everything. And yeah, I think you are a wonderful person, and I'm so glad you are. And now let's talk about, with that being said, let's finish this section, the gymnastics section. So what has that enabled you to do? Like, who are you now? You are like you're a troublemaker again. You're an agitator. What's happening now?
So we've just been given charity status. The organisation that I co-founded, it's called Gymnasts for Change. We're now
Gymnasts for Change.
Gymnasts for Change. We're now a charity. We've been given funding for a 2-year program of international advocacy and survivor support. So we are an international organisation. There's around 1,000 of us around the world campaigning for change in the sport.
There's 1,000 Claires out there.
There's
goodness
a 1,000 other Claires out there.
Goodness me, I don't know. I do not want to be on the other side of that battle. One Claire's enough, but 1,000 of them, have it.
Yeah, because the reality is that, what happens, one of the key things that you're asking is like, well, what is the difference between boxing and gymnastics? And one of the differences is to do with the performance of gender in the sport. Yeah. So boxing is predominantly a sport for men, and traditionally has been. It's not necessarily now, but that's what it has traditionally been, in which one man fronts up to another man to show who's stronger, and then you're rewarded for displays of strength. Gymnastics is the opposite. There's violence in it, just like boxing. But in boxing, the violence is front and center of the sport. That is the entertainment. Mm. In gymnastics, something very, very different and quite sinister is going on, in fact, which is that the violence is hidden And instead, what you see is what I've recently referred to as pixie porn. It's this flirty, young, prepubescent girl doing really difficult things, pretending it's easy. And I'm really interested in the question of like, what is that fantasy of femininity that's being performed in this female sport, which is all about the performance of femininity? And I think about that question a lot, because obviously my other job, my other hat is that I run a professional wrestling school. And for me, professional wrestling is a performance art in which men try on what does masculinity look like for them? How do they want to portray masculinity? So I'm very interested in sports and practices where male strength is being performed and violence is front and center, versus why is it, what would it be that the audience is getting off on when they're watching the pixie porn of these prepubescent girls doing really difficult tricks, making it look easy, and hiding and covering up the very, very difficult training conditions that they're in.
I mean, was that a question to me? I don't know. I don't know what to say.
It's just something. It's something to think about, right? What is the difference between different sports and different sporting practices, and what is the purpose of different sporting practices? But the point is to say that I think that that's why a lot of women are left broken by the sport. There's something sexualized about it.
Yeah.
But that's not spoken about.
Yeah.
And so the consequences for a lot of women when they come out of the sport is that they don't know how to describe, they haven't got the words to describe what they've been through. And so the work of Gymnasts for Change is about trying to begin an articulation process of explaining to those affected people, but also the world, why we should be concerned about what goes on in gymnastics. Because we should, in China, you've got gymnasts who are state property. You've got gymnasts competing at the Olympics who they look like you have to be 16 to compete at the Olympics, but they look like they're 10, 11 years old. So their physical development has been halted and arrested to such an extent that you look at them and you go, what? And so the abuse is in plain sight. It's not been totally unknown to the general public. Nadia Comaneci had to escape from Romania and go to America. Athletes like that, as you're describing, when you've been through that system and you've been given the Olympic badge, you don't necessarily talk about what happened to you. But a book was released last year all about the training conditions that she was in, that's based on documentary evidence from the police at the time, which talks about the abusive camp conditions that she was in. Many athletes in these situations are being exploited and raped and controlled and coerced, and they can't leave. And really what that does is it's when the trust is broken. When we think about what is the problem of emotional abuse or physical abuse or sexual abuse, it's never the act. Anyone can get punched and recover. It's not the act, but it's the breaking of the trust that happens in that moment. And when your trust is repeatedly broken over multiple years, it leaves you in a headspace where you don't know who to trust, and it makes it very difficult to form attachments, positive, healthy attachments, that then has repercussions later in life. So life now for me looks like trying to get good attachment patterns because I don't have them, or trying to have a positive self-image, which I just don't have because I was bullied for so many years. I thought I was the problem. I thought it was me. I wasn't good enough. So I go around in life thinking I'm not good enough, and that's the work of a 42-year-old woman at this point doing the work that I'm doing, is just to try and stay centered, that we are campaigning against something important, that because the gaslighting goes on, whether it's people like you who are in sport who are saying, hang on a minute, I don't think this is abuse, or whether it's the coaches saying, we did absolutely nothing wrong, these gymnasts are liars. The gaslighting puts layer upon layer upon layer of silencing. And so right now it's just about talking and keeping talking and hearing more and more stories, and the more stories that come out, the more other people speak, and then the more we hear about exactly how pervasive the sexual abuse is in the sport.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the difference, isn't it? Like I never went home and questioned the way I look. I never went home and questioned, like, am I good enough? Like I went home and thought, God, I spotted a grown man today, and I gave as good as I got, which, and that's the difference. And I don't know if it's a female man thing, a female male thing. I don't know if it's boxer, gymnast thing. I don't know what it is. Like that's what I said at the beginning. I never felt like I was getting abused. Don't get me wrong. Look back now, and would I want my 12-year-old son getting punched by a grown man? Probably not. Definitely not. But I just, and I honestly think what you're doing with Gymnasts for Change is so good, because I think it's so sad how you're beautiful, you're funny, you're attractive, you're so talented, you're so just good. For you to question your own self-worth is so unbelievably disgusting, and I hate those people that made you feel that way. And if there's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people like you out there, and I just feel so sad, and I kind of feel like a bit of a dick now for kind of trying to like argue the case.
No, I think it's useful, because these are debates that need to be brought into the public realm, because these ideas about what is needed and necessary to create an Olympian are so endemic. They're so ingrained in Western culture that they have to be discussed in order for us to unpick them and go, surely there's a different way. Like, maybe we can create an amazing Olympic Games, but by upholding everybody's human rights.
I agree. So I think, Gymnasts for Change, where can people follow it, learn it? You've got a documentary coming out.
We do. There's a documentary coming out.
Soon.
February 22nd, Thursday night at 9 p.m. on ITV.
This probably would have went out after that.
Yep.
So where can people watch it?
Watch it on the ITV hub. And then there'll be another documentary out later, just before the Olympics, which is more of an international film. Go to our website, have a look at all the resources, look at all the reviews. There's about 7 reviews that have been done around the world now, each finding endemic abuse within the sport of gymnastics in each territory. Follow us on social media, and just engage with this stuff, because what we think of as worth it and good use of public funds needs to be questioned. The DCMS, the Department of Media, Culture and Sport, they're the people that hand out the funding, and the DCMS give funding to the arts and the Arts Council, and they give funding to UK sport. And in my opinion, we should be questioning really strongly whether UK sport should be getting as much of the funding pot as they are. Is that the best use of public funds on an international stage? Or actually, is it better to share Shakespeare with China? Should we be taking theatre shows on tour and making art exhibitions? Is that a better use of public funds? And I think that's an important question for everyone to be engaged in asking.
But where can they follow and get involved? You mentioned follow on Instagram.
So it's just Gymnasts for Change. Gymnasts for Change on Instagram, nice. Twitter, website.
That was intense. Enjoyable. I've learned. I feel like a more well-rounded individual now than I did an hour ago. But I brought you on the podcast. Now let's talk about you. Because you are somebody, as I mentioned now twice before, inspired me. I think you're wonderful. I think you're great at what you do. Who is Claire Heafford? You mentioned how you struggled with kind of self-worth, relationships, attachment issues, of the word you said. I think what's been your journey so far? What do you identify as? Because you've done so much. You've done so much, and like, I'm gonna ask loads of questions here. Feel free to answer what you want. What do you identify most strongly as? Why do you do so much? Are you running from something? Are you hiding from something? You mentioned at the very beginning that you move on, you get bored. Are you bored, or are you scared? Are you scared to kind of really focus on one thing? That's why you do gymnastics and athletics and some artists here and teaching here, and like, you do so much.
Yeah. This is a really interesting question. I identify now, I think, as an artist and an activist. I went to art school. So after I had done gymnastics, I spent my early 20s at art school in London. And, the art world is so different than the world of sport. Sport is about, pursuit of one single activity to the nth degree, and it often, for many people, ends in a devastation of mental health, where people just push themselves to the edge.
But can we just, I want to say one thing as well, like, and I get it. Like, listen, we've had conversations before and even today, but it's also a wonderful thing.
It is.
Sport's also an amazing, wonderful thing,
yeah.
And it does so much for communities and bring people together. Like, I come from a small town. Nothing was expected from me. Mum, 5 kids, single parent. We didn't have a lot. And I get to live this amazing life now. Don't get me wrong, I have my struggles. I have a lot of struggles, right? But I've had these unbelievable experiences, and I still get, all because of sport. So don't get me wrong, it took some stuff from me. It took away the vision of my left eye. It took away a lot, but it gave me so much. So I know it can break people, but it can also make people.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I fully recognise that I'm able to do all the things I'm doing now because I just keep getting back up. Like, I haven't had an easy ride, but I do always get back up, and I've learned that about myself, and I guess that's a quality I'm proud of now, and it means that I feel resilient enough to sort of try anything that I turn my hand to and know I'll be pretty good at it because I know how to apply myself, I know how to push myself, I know how to stick with things and not give up. And so, yeah, of course, sport teaches you all of those things. And for me, like, one of the main things that athletics did was show me this incredible world of community and how sport creates communities and communities that you can become part of. And that's very much what I do now. Is in many ways, I've been a community builder for the last 15, 20 years. I ran an artist studios for 8 years with my lovely business partner. And we had an amazing community of artists around us then. And that's what I've done. That's the part that I play, I think, at Play Fight. We've brought together this community of men who, you know, many of whom are struggling with masculine identity and trying to find a physical practice that fits them as a way of exploring who they are in the world and what they're supposed to be and what it means to be a man. And I love that I support that and that we've created a community there. And now it's a community with Gymnasts for Change as well. So I guess in many ways I'm a community builder at heart.
Mother hen,
yeah,
bringing us all together. And so what is Play Fight? For those that don't know, what is Play Fight?
So Play Fight is the biggest professional wrestling school in the UK. We're an independent professional wrestling school. And we run a program 6 days a week of professional wrestling classes. So you can come and you can learn the art of professional wrestling. And it
truly is an art, isn't it? And I've trained a lot, and I love the school. I love you. I love Tom. Tom's your lovely partner, who is so good. And you guys are brilliant. And I think I've told you this before. When I was thinking, I might open a Western school in England. I might move back to England and open a Western school because there's a few dotted around, but nothing like super professional. And for using my boxing background and the place I've trained at some really great schools in the world. And then I went to train at your place. And I walked in and I was going to run out my then roommate, my friend Darian. We were going to move to England and open the school. He was going to run out 4 meals and come in now and then. I walked in your place. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to open up a school. This is far too good. You guys have created such a wonderful place. And what I love about it, it's really safe. A lot of Western places aren't particularly that safe. It's just, and when I say safe like learning the moves and stuff, but also just so safe. And you mentioned a minute ago about like men of their identity and stuff. What I love about Play Fight, you go to a class, any class, it's a who's who of individuals. It's people that are such a diverse. You wouldn't get this group in any other room in the world, would you? People, gay, straight, tall, small, black, white. I'm pretty sure the other day there's a girl go yellow with pink spots. It's such a wonderful place, and you can just truly be yourself. Nobody judges. Everyone's there to kind of learn the art of whatever the art they're teaching. It's such a special place, and I miss it when I'm in the US. Not being there, I really do.
Oh, thank you. We've done two and a bit years now, so we're still very much in the setup phase of Play Fight as both a community and as a business. And I think the thing that I'm really enjoying at the moment is we've just begun doing a lot more socials. So socializing with people from the school, off school premises. And
you went bowling the other day.
Yeah, well, bowling tomorrow night.
You didn't invite me last week. Where'd you go last week? Oh, you went to a club.
We went to a club last week. And yeah, I think that's where you can really start to see like how much the friendships mean to people, and that can be really life-changing. And for me, I think I'm interested in wrestling almost as like drama therapy. And it's about people coming together and sharing the struggles that they're having, and creating a space where you can use the wrestling as a metaphor for what you're trying to struggle through. The struggles that show up while you're trying to learn something new teach you something about how you handle struggles in life. And that's massively valuable, whether that's wrestling or that's sport. That is really the key benefit of sport. And it doesn't matter what level you do it at. You don't need to be a professional. You can be just a regular community member. But that's why sport for me is great. Is it, as you say, it's character building and teaches you about yourself.
Arts, right? So you went to art school. Art and like, I'm thinking of wrestling, but wrestling could be anything. They often say in wrestling that like it's a bunch of outcasts coming together. You've heard that term?
Very much.
And like, and it's a bunch of odd people. Like, it's a bunch of odd people like doing odd stuff. And I'm one. I'm not saying this in a derogatory way. I'm an odd person. I know I'm not normal. The way I think and the things that I do, it's not the norm. Why do you think the arts attracts odd people and outcasts?
I mean, it's neurodiversity in all its forms, isn't it? It's thinking styles. We live in a capitalist world which requires certain processes to be as efficient as possible, and that requires brains to function in certain ways. The reality is that everybody is an individual, but some people are better at disguising themselves as kind of regular people that fit the system better. And so there'll always be people that aren't so good at fitting in or don't want to fit in fact. But yeah, that's definitely a feature of the arts and of wrestling, that it's a bunch of people that maybe don't fit into other roles. And I think it's really interesting for me when I come across other sports people in the world of wrestling, because lots of people come to wrestling because they see it as a more accessible way to start performing. So they come with performance skills or performance aspirations, but not necessarily with an athletic background. And then sometimes you get the reverse. You get people who come in with the athletic background who've not really performed before. I'm really interested in wrestling because the number of skills required to be good at it are exponential. And I'd be interested to hear from you. But from my point of view, I did gymnastics, was in the national gymnastics squad. I was a national level 400 meter hurdler. I got recruited to the British skeleton bob team. I did a bit of weightlifting for a while. I was able to transfer my skills from sport to sport. And usually within about 12 to 18 months, coaches were saying, right, yep, you're going to be great at this. And, I was sort of like competing at a national level quite quickly.
Just want to jump in before we move on. I get that. But as much as your physical attributes, I think it's up here. I think it's mental. That's why you get so good, because you are so driven. And I think that's, you notice that from the businesses that you set up, you just have that, you have that thing and you go after it. And I love that about you. And the ability to kind of get back up as well over time. Like, obviously you're physically very, very talented, but how much of it is mental, do you think?
Gymnastics gave me a level of self-confidence. If you can do, I think for me, the thing is, like, at the age of 10, I was learning to do like a back somersault on a wooden beam that's 10 centimeters wide and a meter off the floor. And when you get that level of confidence in something as a 10-year-old, you start to carry that through with you. So yeah, for sure, there's some areas that I'm super confident in, and then there's other areas I have no self-esteem at all. And
which really surprises me, really, because really, you mentioned before about wrestling. That's why I don't want to go back to what you're going to say a minute ago. We'll put the anxiety stuff a bit later.
I can't remember. So I think I was just going to say that the number of skills required to be a professional wrestler are insane. To be a really high-level top wrestler, you've got to have footwork, comedy timing, improv skills, creativity, an ability to write storylines, an ability to deliver lines, to act, to be athletic, to be agile, to be fast, strong, have long stamina. I mean, to be a top wrestler, it's a monumental task. And I'm 7 years in, and I feel I still know very little at all. And it's the most difficult thing I've ever done. Is learn to wrestle. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think it is because of these self-esteem issues around. For me, performing is a very vulnerable place to be, because performing for me as a gymnast meant putting myself out there and being torn to shreds. So my expectation is that whatever I do, it's going to be torn to shreds, and I tear it. Whether that's the audience tearing me to shreds or it's myself, and often it's myself, but. I found it really difficult learning to wrestle because wrestling is language, and wrestling is so intrinsically linked with the fans. And so I always knew the fans know more about wrestling than I do. So I started performing in these shows, and I had no idea what I was doing. You know, people would be speaking the wrestling backstage and say, okay, here's the agreement. This is approximately. Here's the agreement. This is approximately what we're doing. Oh, by the way, Claire, we'll give you a Blue Thunder. Have you done that before? No. What is it? You'll be fine. Okay.
That's what they say. Yeah.
So,
I haven't done that before. You'll figure it out.
Yeah. And I'd just get in the ring, and then they'd start doing something. I'd land in a bump, you know, and I'd have no idea what had happened. And so for me, the storytelling, because wrestling is like a soap opera, and so I can relate to the idea that somebody would have watched EastEnders for 30 years and know all the storylines. But yeah, I don't know all the storylines of WWE. I do not know the history of it. So when I'm performing, I know I'm performing in front of fans who know so much more than I do, that I'm just, worried, infinitely worried that I'm messing the whole thing up.
What's the best bit of performing in wrestling? What's the best bit?
Well, for me, it's throwing myself off stuff and being caught. I realized the other day that as a kid in the playground at school, I was obviously a gymnast from being like 4 years old. So I was the kid at the school that could do cartwheels and flips and things. And so I was always in this position where the older boys would come and be like, oh, Claire, can we pick you up and throw you? Or Claire, can you do back flips in a row? And I'd be like, yeah. And it would get me praised. So for me, that's absolutely what wrestling allowed. My first, pretty much my second ever wrestling session, I was there with Tom, who's my now partner, and Will Ospreay, who's now, top of the world in terms of the world of wrestling, doing Will's most difficult tricks. And I just walked into the school. I knew nothing about wrestling, but I saw these weird, highly emotive men getting very excited about doing really stupid, physical, dangerous stuff. And I thought, wow, my inner child is really excited about doing this. And I just joined in. And I love being thrown in the air and being caught. And I really enjoy using my gymnastics skills in a way that my Russian gymnastics coach would find appalling, because gymnastics is about the art of perfection and wrestling is about the art of the fuck up. And so I really, for me, there's an enormous sense of, I don't know, like, it's healing. It's healing to kind of do this thing which is deliberately supposed to look like absolute junk.
I wrestled at the weekend, and you mentioned about the improv and comedy timing. And for those who don't, this wasn't meant to be a wrestling podcast. I guess it's turning into, it's more of a performance.
Yeah, performance.
And you sound like watching you smile when you talk about it. It's almost like you kind of found your home. You found like you almost feel at home when, like you said just then, like you're able to like do these tricks now, and rather than getting shouted at by a horrible Russian man, you get praised and lauded, by the fans in the arena. But the rest of the weekend, and it's so funny, they were like they were hot. They'd be really mean to me. They'd be to the point where I broke out. I had to laugh. I mean, I could not laugh. They were calling me a Poundland David Hay.
That's amazing.
and it was really, and I can't remember what song it is in a football chant song, and I couldn't hear what it was at the first, and then it clicked. I had to laugh, and then they said to me, and I got some art on the lower part of my back. Now some people call it a tramp stamp. And hundreds of fans in Southampton on Saturday night were calling it a tramp stamp. Wow. In a really creative, funny way in a song. And I was like, fuck, I'm going to be the bad guy here and you're making me laugh.
Yeah.
But it's comedy time. And I threatened some typical Western fan sat front row with an umbrella. And he was giving it the big end. And I said to him, one more word from you, I'm going to shove the umbrella up your fat ass. And the whole place laughed, and then and I thought, I'm back on top now. I'm the bad guy again.
Yeah.
And then, it's just great, isn't it? It's just great, and everyone's there to have a good time. Like the fans want to have a good time. No, it's I love performing. I love the performance. So what is it about performing? Not so much as because this double question. Not so much about what you love to do, the flips and tricks and getting caught by people, which is funny, but about performing. But when your music hits, you come out the curtain, and everyone's looking at you. About what is about the performance that makes you want to carry on doing it?
Well, interestingly, I think the things that other people like about the performing are not the things I enjoy. So I do not enjoy being the center of attention. There's very little I enjoy about it, but what I enjoy about it is like it's a similar adrenaline rush to when you're an athlete. But I don't have to be in the same shape as I was in when I was an athlete. Like as a 400-meter hurdler, I pushed myself so hard. I was only 5 foot, but you know, my claim to fame was that I got to race the world champion, who was an Australian at that time. And to do that as a 5 foot woman, I had to push myself so hard. But to join in with wrestling, you know, it's what I do as my retirement. It's my way of recovering as an athlete, and I'm choosing to spend my retirement doing this thing that still gives me a buzz. So it's the buzz of doing flips. I like to be, you know, I like the idea that I'm a 42-year-old mum who climbs up to a corner post and does a moonsault, and everyone goes, what? That's 42-year-old mums are not supposed to do that. And if that's my contribution to like positive aging for imaging of women, you know, to sort of like be some sort of representation for a different version of what a 42-year-old mum looks like, then that's what I enjoy. Last year I did a match at Progress, and I was in the main event with Tom against his character is called Cara Noir. So it was Cara Noir against Spike Trevay, and I guess I thought, like, what's the most feminist thing I could do here? You know, because I don't always enjoy the representations of women in professional wrestling. So I chose to wrestle wearing jeans and a cardigan, and I did a back somersault off the corner post to land on Spike Trevay, who was on top of Cara Noir. And there's an image of me doing that, and I really like that I'm wearing a cardigan.
That's brilliant. For those listening, Claire's got a massive smile. It's the biggest smile on your face of the day.
Yeah, that's what I feel proud of, is that I wore a cardigan to do it, and that it's not what you expect of somebody that's wearing a cardigan, I guess.
So, young lady, there's so much we haven't touched upon. Your life. You mentioned at the top, like you got divorce and the divorce from your best friend and business partner, and the toll that took on you. You mentioned about you got to a stage where you want to have a baby, and you prioritized that. I know the ups and downs in your childhood, because you've told me off air, which I would love to get into. Today doesn't seem the right time, so I'm going to ask you a favor. Would you come back with me one day and do this again?
Yeah, of course.
And do a Claire Heafford part 2, because you really are and also the world of business, which I'm now kind of getting into with my app and app stuff and fitness stuff. I just think this has been a really powerful conversation. I wouldn't want to dilute it anywhere by talking about anything else and kind of like not doing that justice. I know you had difficulties growing up with some family stuff, and you know, and I want to give that the time and attention it deserves. You, one, because it's your story and it's you own it, and you should be able to tell it and not feel rushed. I want to listen to it and I'll be responding. And also for those who've gone through similar things, listen to it. They deserve to hear that story, you know, without like feeling rushed. So I think I'd like to leave it here for today. I think I've had a lovely, really powerful conversation. Thank you so much for opening up my mindset to what abuse is. It's made me think a lot about my career, actually. Like, was that okay? You know, was that okay sparring men as a kid? You know, I choose to look on the positive side and look at what I got from it rather than what I didn't. But like you said, I got some sort of reward, and that wasn't a reward that I wanted, or wasn't the end goal that I thought I would get, but I still did get a reward, which makes me think, oh, maybe it was justified. Yeah. To understand what you're saying, many who don't get to that level for whatever reason, maybe don't have that justification for going through that, you know, the turmoil that they were put through. I fully understand that, and I love the impromptu chat about wrestling. I like, because I don't really talk a great deal on here about wrestling. It's not really about that, but I love we've ended on a real nice that lovely smile you ended on. That was fantastic. You mentioned at the beginning of Getting Back Up, this is the Getting Back Up podcast. Where are you now in terms of your journey of getting back up?
So after I closed the business with the business partner who I had a wonderful friendship with and wonderful 8 years of my life, I was really, really at a loss as to what to do next. And I spent about 6 months giving myself time and space. And I said to myself, okay, let's make a rule. The rule is you've got to get fit, get in shape, and you're only allowed to, you've got to do that in a way where you're only doing things that bring you joy. So I spent 6 months just trying new things that I thought would bring me joy. And in that process, I went to a circus school and hung upside down on a hoop. I started doing high diving, and I found professional wrestling. And as you kind of identified, when I walked into that school with Tom and Will Ospreay, I could see there was something here. I didn't know what it was, and it wasn't necessarily the best training environment, but there was something really important I felt held the key to what I wanted to do next. That was kind of to do with using my gymnastic skills in performance settings that were non-competitive, where I could use my artistic skills as well. And so that's what I've spent the last 8 years doing, is trying to build a life that is aligned, I would say. And so in terms of that getting back up journey, my work life, I now do 3 dream jobs simultaneously. It's like I'm overwhelmed with work all the time because I'm doing so many exciting things, and so I'm in the place that I need to be. And by doing all those dream jobs, I'm having to face the reality of all the crap I tell myself about how I'm not good enough. And so I'm
You still tell yourself that?
Yeah.
But you said in the interview that that on that day, and don't get me wrong, I don't expect one thing to happen in 30 something years to just go. But what's it going to take for you to go, oh, I am enough?
Yes, it's a process. It's definitely a process. So now I create evidence all the time that I'm doing the things I want to be doing, and I'm doing quite well in them.
Do them well. As well. Honestly, like, you've taught me things that you taught me like stuff on one night. You told me by the end of the night you can do a backflip. Don't be silly. I did a standing backflip. And not just did it, and this is the whole thing. This is the thing, and this is going back to the gymnastics thing. You taught me it, and guess what? We had fun. You had fun teaching me it. You had fun. There's one thing, you make me do handstands with my hands. I like to use my knuckles. I don't know. We're not going to see eye to eye on that. On my bad wrists. But we had so much fun.
Yeah.
And 3 hours went by like that, and I was like, what, already? I think I was a little bit sore the next day, but I had so much fun, and honestly, you're so good, and I wish you'd realise that you're more than enough.
Oh, thank you. That's very sweet. The world is giving me evidence that challenges my internal dialogue. So I guess it's going to be a lifetime's work managing that internal dialogue, because the reality is, if you get shouted and screamed at and told you're not good enough for 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, for an extended period of time, that in formative years when you're growing as a person, it has an effect, and it's not easy to get rid of that. But Tom is using a lot of meditation at the moment, and he's trying to encourage me to meditate. And it's a process. It's a process.
Good. Well, it's a process that I'm very proud you are where you're at.
Thank you.
And I know you're gonna get to the you're gonna I hope it's not a lifetime process, like you said. I hope it's a process you get there much quicker, and then the rest of your life you can just look in the mirror and go, you again, I like you. I'll just wrap this bad boy up. Where can people follow you and follow the charities you're involved with?
So website is Gymnast for Change. We've got Gymnast for Change on social media, so just search Gymnast for Change. And I have my own Instagram with not very many followers, but because I only started it last year, because my self-image was so bad that I was afraid to share anything. So that's been a process. I've done 6 months on Instagram under my own name, putting all the different things, the mix of different things that I do on there, and I look at it and I feel proud, but that's a new experience.
Is it a nice experience?
It's a nice experience.
Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, I am. It's interesting to look at my life in that way, and from the outside, it gives me outside perspective on what my life looks like, I guess, rather than just listening to the very negative self-talk. But that's Claire Heafford on Instagram.
CLAIRE.
Yep.
HEAFFORD.
That is correct.
Check me out.
Yeah.
And finally, next podcast, we're going to talk app stuff, business stuff, your upbringing, your childhood, Luna. But before I go on, how is Luna?
She's great. We got a good one. She's a total joy to hang out with. And I look forward to many years of company from her and having a good relationship with her.
And I'm sure she hasn't, but I hope she doesn't take on board things you've taken on board from other people. I hope she realizes she is enough.
Yeah, I hope so too. She's a real social person who, she's 5, but she really understands emotion.
Luna's Claire's daughter, by the way. Like you said, you've got a good one. Like it was like, like
a dog.
Yeah.
A well-behaved dog. Yeah, no, Luna was my daughter, and yeah, she's lovely.
Wow. Well, Claire, thank you so much for coming today. You're a star, an absolute star. And yeah, just until next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anthony.
As I said at the beginning of the podcast, Claire is a truly powerful and inspiring person. She's inspired me massively in life and in business. She's a wonderful, wonderful lady. And Claire, I want to thank you again for coming on the podcast and for opening up your wounds for the benefit of me and the lovely listeners here at Getting Back Up. Thank you so much. I mean, I want to apologize if I caused any offense to anybody, Claire, including yourself, for poking and prying and prodding a lot. I mean, I want to learn, I want to grow, and I really found that a fascinating conversation. I found it fascinating that we can kind of go through similar things, not the same, similar things, and look at it from different perspectives. One of my favorite quotes from Muhammad Ali, he said, "If you see the world at 50, as you did at 20, you've wasted 30 years of your life." And that's the whole thing about life, always growing. Well, we should always be growing. When we think we haven't got to grow anymore and you learn anymore, then that's when it's game over, in my opinion. Always growing, always evolving, always getting new information, always hearing maybe different stories or the same story from a different perspective. And that's what life is all about. It's about, just rolling with the punches and learning and absorbing certain things. And I learned so much from this podcast. Claire, thank you so much. It was a wonderful conversation, as I mentioned, from a wonderful individual. I want to have Claire back on the podcast because Claire is somebody that I really admire. Actually, somebody really, as I mentioned, very strong, resolute individual, as I'm sure you heard, and that was your own takeaway from this podcast. And Claire, I will 100% get Claire back on the podcast and talk about her life, because as you mentioned, as you heard, she's been through it these last few years and her entire life, and I'm really fascinated about how the abuse is still to this day really affects her, because she has so much going for her. And there's another conversation. There's probably another 10 conversations to have with Claire, but we'll probably do one, maybe 2 more. So with that being said, I want to thank you again one last time for coming on the podcast, Claire. Thank you so much for all the lovely listeners here at the Getting Back Up podcast. Thank you for being loyal to us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for reaching out each week. So thank you for commenting and liking the podcast and sharing the podcast and leaving reviews. All these little things really help. They really help to kind of keep us going. So please keep liking, keep sharing. If you think somebody could benefit from this conversation, please send this podcast to them. This is your weekly dose of hope and inspiration. Times are going to get tough. They always are. That's what happens in life. Life hits us hard when we least expect it. If you find yourself going down in this next week, you only got one option. That's to always get back up. See you next week, team.